The paper in his hands might as well have been on fire with how fast he dropped it back into the document case. He opened his mouth, probably to spew some excuse or Hail Mary plea, but I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction. Go ahead, I said, crossing my arms and leaning back against my car. Say whatever it is you think will save your job. I could use the laugh. Look, he started, his voice shaky like a leaf in the wind. This was just a misunderstanding, okay? I didn't know who you were, and oh, so it's okay to violate someone's rights as long as they're not your boss? I cut him off, my tone sharp enough to slice through steel. Because that's what I'm hearing, Hendrik. Am I wrong? He blinked at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish, gasping for air. No, that's not. Look, I'm just saying maybe we don't have to take this any further. I can fix this. I'll apologize. Apologize? I said, letting out a bitter laugh. That's rich. Tell me, Hendrik, how many people have you pulled this kind of stunt on before? How many people didn't have a document in their trunk that forced you to backpedal? His silence said it all. He looked down at the pavement like it had all the answers, but we both knew the truth. This wasn't his first rodeo, and it wouldn't have been his last if he hadn't run into me. Yeah, that's what I thought, I said, shaking my head. You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught. Come on, man, he said, his voice dripping with desperation now. You've got to understand this job. It's all I've got. I made a mistake, okay? But I can learn. I can change. Just don't do this. I stared at him for a long moment, letting his words hang in the air. The rain kept falling, soaking both of us, but I didn't care. This wasn't about him. It was about the people who came before me, those who didn't get the chance to stand up for themselves, who didn't have the power to say, enough. You want to change? I finally said, my voice steady and cold. Then prove it. But you're not doing it in my department. His face crumpled like a paper bag, and for a second, I thought he might actually start crying. You can't do this, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I need this job. No, I said. What you needed was a wake-up call. And consider this it. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I'd been saving for this exact moment. The line rang once before a familiar voice picked up. Chief Peterson, came the crisp greeting on the other end. It's me, I said. I've got Officer Hendrik here with me. Effective immediately, he's terminated. Notify HR and make sure the paperwork is expedited. Hendrik's eyes widened as the reality of the situation hit him like a freight train. Wait, you don't have to do this, he stammered, his voice rising in panic. Please, I'll do whatever you want. I held a hand to silence him. It's done, Hendrik. Pack your things and turn in your badge and gun by the end of the day. And don't even think about appealing. The complaints against you are well documented. I ended the call without waiting for a reply. When I looked back at Hendrik, he was frozen in place, his face a mix of disbelief and sheer terror. It was the kind of look you'd expect from someone who just realized their worst nightmare had come true. Here's a tip, I said, stepping closer to him. Next time you put on a uniform, if anyone's ever foolish enough to give you another one, remember what it's supposed to stand for. Protect and serve, not harass and intimidate. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, drenched and defeated, as I picked up the document case and closed my trunk. He thought it would be just another routine stop. A few threats, a bit of humiliation, all on his terms. But when he opened my trunk and froze, staring at a document that would change his life forever, I knew the show had only just begun. Sometimes, the predator becomes the prey, and this night would be one he'd never forget. You know those moments when you feel something's off even before it happens? Like when the air gets too still before a storm? Yeah, that was me, driving down Main Street. The rain was drizzling, my windshield wipers doing their best to keep up, and everything felt off. I was on my way home after a long day, the kind where your brain feels like mush and all you want is a hot shower and silence. Then I saw them, red and blue lights flashing in my rearview mirror. A police cruiser. Here we go, I muttered under my breath. I wasn't speeding, my taillights were fine, and my plates were legit. So, what was the deal? Oh, wait, I knew what it was. Driving while black. Classic. I pulled over, my hands already at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel because we all know the drill. The cop car parked, and I watched as this big guy in a pressed uniform stepped out, his boots crunching on the wet pavement. His whole vibe screamed, I run this town. And honestly, I was already exhausted. License and registration, he barked as he reached my window. No hello, no good evening, just straight to business. His tone wasn't asking, it was commanding, like I'd already done something wrong. Good evening, officer, I said, keeping my voice steady. Can I ask why you pulled me over? You're driving suspiciously slow, he said, squinting at me like I just insulted his mother. I blinked. Suspiciously slow? Was that even a thing? It's raining. I said. I'm just being careful. He leaned in closer, water dripping off the brim of his hat. Careful, huh? You got something to hide in this car, pal? There it was, that word. Pal. Not sir, not mister. Just pal. Delivered with enough condescension to fill a football stadium. Officer. I don't have anything to hide, I said calmly. Everything's in order. I reached slowly, emphasis on slowly, to grab my license and registration from the glove compartment. The last thing I needed was him thinking I was reaching for a weapon. He snatched the papers from my hand and glanced over them like he couldn't be bothered. Stay right here, he ordered, stomping back to his cruiser. I watched him in my side mirror, half expecting him to call for backup or pull some kind of stunt. Something about him just screamed, this isn't going to end well. When he came back, he looked irritated, like he'd been hoping for a reason to escalate things and hadn't found one. Step out of the vehicle, he said. What's the reason, officer? I asked, keeping my tone polite but firm. I've done nothing wrong. Step out of the vehicle, he repeated, emphasizing each word like I was hard of hearing. I sighed and complied because, let's be honest, arguing wasn't going to help. I stepped out into the drizzle, the cold wetness soaking through my jacket almost immediately. Open the trunk, he demanded, gesturing to the back of my car. Officer, with all due respect, you need a warrant for that, I said. His face twisted into a smirk, the kind that made my stomach churn. You see, that's where you're wrong. I can check whatever I damn well please. Actually, no, you can't, I replied, my voice steady, but he wasn't listening. He was already heading to the trunk, fumbling with his keyring like he owned the car. Officer, you're violating my rights, I said louder, but he ignored me completely, popping the trunk open like it was his personal treasure chest. That's when he spotted it. A sleek gray document case sitting neatly in the corner of the trunk. What's this? He asked, his tone suddenly shifting to curiosity mixed with suspicion. Personal property, I said sharply. You have no right, but he was already reaching for it. My heart pounded as he unlatched the case and opened it. For a split second, I wanted to laugh at how eager he looked, like a kid unwrapping a birthday present. Then his expression froze. His face turned the color of chalk as his eyes scanned the document lying neatly on top. Whatever confidence he'd had evaporated in an instant. His jaw tightened, and his hands trembled slightly as he held the paper closer to his face. Officer Thomas H. Hendrick, I said, watching the realization dawn on him. Now, do you want to explain why you just violated the rights of your new boss? Let me tell you something about people like Officer Hendrick. They don't know when to quit. Seriously, the guy was acting like he just cracked the biggest case of his life, and all he had to show for it was my trunk full of absolutely nothing. Well, nothing except for that gray document case. Now, when I saw him pull it out, I felt this weird mix of frustration and excitement. Yeah, I'll admit it, there was a part of me that was curious to see how this would play out because Hendrick, he had no idea the storm he just walked into. What's in here, huh? He asked, holding up the case like it was some kind of trophy. His smirk was back, but it looked more forced now, like he was trying to convince himself this was still going his way. Put it down, I said, keeping my tone as calm as possible, even though inside I was screaming. That's private property and you're way out of line. He ignored me, big shock there, and popped the latches on the case. It opened with a soft click, and he flipped it up to look inside. That's when the magic happened. His eyes landed on the top sheet of paper, and you'd think he'd just seen a ghost. The color drained from his face so fast, I half expected him to pass out right there in the rain. He squinted at the document, then blinked a few times, like he was hoping it would magically turn into something else. Wait a minute, what the hell is this? He muttered under his breath, but I heard him loud and clear. His voice had lost that cocky edge, and now he sounded nervous. Oh, how the tables had turned. What's the matter, Officer Hendrick? I asked, leaning casually against my car. Something catch your eye? He didn't answer. His hands were shaking as he held the paper closer to his face. I could see the big, bold letters at the top of the document from where I stood. Notice of termination. Beneath that was his name, clear as day, followed by a list of offenses that would make anyone think twice about hiring this guy for so much as a babysitting gig. Dude, this can't be real, he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Then he looked up at me, and I swear I've never seen a man go from arrogant to terrified so fast in my life. What the hell is this? That, my friend, I said, crossing my arms and giving him a slow, deliberate smile, is a very official document, and you're holding it without permission, by the way. He blinked at me like I'd just spoken to him in ancient Greek. Permission? You… what? What the hell is going on here? Why don't you read the whole thing, officer? Might clear up some of your confusion, I said, tilting my head toward the paper. I could practically see the wheels turning in his head. And let me tell you, they were squeaking. His eyes darted back to the paper and I watched as the words sank in. The offenses, the complaints, the recommendation for immediate dismissal, all of it. Then, finally, the signature at the bottom. James Peterson, Chief of Police. You're, you're the, he started, but the words got caught in his throat. He looked up at me, his face pale as the clouds above us. This can't be real. You're not, I'm not what? I said, raising an eyebrow. Your new boss. Sorry to disappoint, but yeah, that's exactly who I am. His mouth opened and closed a few times, but no words came out. It was like watching a fish flop around on dry land. And honestly, I was living for it. Look, this has to be a mistake, he finally managed to choke out. You're not supposed to, you're… Let me stop you right there, I said, holding up a hand. Before you say something even dumber than what's already come out of your mouth, I was brought in to clean up this department. And guess what? Your name was at the top of my list. His hands dropped to his sides, the paper still clutched between his fingers. He looked like he'd just been hit by a freight train. But, look, we can work this out, okay? I didn't mean anything by it. Oh, you didn't mean anything by it? I interrupted, my voice dripping with sarcasm. So, when you stopped me for absolutely no reason, searched my car without a warrant, and opened my private property, that was all just a big misunderstanding? Come on, man, he said, his tone shifting to desperate. I didn't know who you were, and that makes it okay. I shot back. What if I wasn't your boss? Would that make your actions acceptable? Because I've got to tell you, Hendrik, that's not how the law works. Not anymore. He stared at me, his face a mix of panic and disbelief. I could see the gears in his head turning, probably trying to figure out a way to dig himself out of the massive hole he just created. Spoiler alert, there was no way out. Please, he said, his voice barely above a whisper now. Just give me a chance to explain. I shook my head. Oh, don't worry, Hendrik. You'll get a chance to explain, just not to me. And with that, I grabbed my phone and made the call that would officially end his career. The rain kept falling, but for the first time all night, I felt completely in control. So there we were. Me, standing in the rain, calm as a cucumber, and Officer Hendrik looking like he'd just been hit by a bus.